"I'll never love anyone again," said the widowed businesswoman until the new gardener arrived. Elizabeth Mitchell Anderson wept alone on the mansion's balcony, clutching the last letter her husband had left before departing forever. 3 years had passed, but the pain remained as sharp as the first day. "I'll never love anyone again," she vowed aloud, tearing the paper into pieces that scattered across the neglected garden. That's when she noticed a simple man carefully gathering the fragments. The new gardener the housekeeper had hired without her permission. Elizabeth stormed down the mansion's marble stairs, ready to fire him on the spot. "What are you doing here?" she shouted, tears still in her eyes. The man turned slowly, holding the torn letter gently. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm Michael Parker, the gardener. I thought you might want to piece this back together later, when the pain eases a little." Elizabeth was speechless. No one had ever addressed her grief so directly, yet so respectfully. "Mrs. Anderson, please don't fire him," pleaded Martha, the housekeeper who had worked there for over 20 years. "The garden has been completely neglected since Mr. Richard passed. It was his favorite place." The businesswoman looked around. The garden that had once been her husband's pride was now just a patch of weeds and withered plants. The rose bushes Richard had loved so much were barely alive. "Fine," Elizabeth said reluctantly, "but I don't want any direct contact with him. Martha, you handle everything." Michael simply nodded, understanding the situation. Elizabeth returned to the balcony, watching him work in silence. In the weeks that followed, something strange began to happen. Flowers started appearing mysteriously in specific spots around the house. A small daisy on the nightstand, violets on the breakfast table, a single rosebud on the office desk. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us newcomers so much. Now back to the story. Each flower came with handwritten notes, simple yet comforting. "The sun always returns after the storm," one read. "The most beautiful plants grow in the toughest soil," said another. Elizabeth tried to ignore them, but she couldn't help searching for the day's flower when she woke up. It was as if someone understood exactly how she felt. One afternoon, the phone rang. It was Jennifer, her daughter, who had lived in New York City for 5 years, working at a multinational company. "Mum, Aunt Victoria called me worried. She said you hired a young gardener and he's taking advantage of the situation." "Jennifer, that's not true," Elizabeth replied, surprised at how quickly she defended him. "Mum, you don't know these kinds of people. They sense when a woman is vulnerable and exploit it. I'm coming this weekend to talk to you." Elizabeth hung up, unsettled. Victoria was Richard's sister and she had always resented the life they'd built together. Now she seemed to be spreading rumors about the gardener. That evening, a heavy storm swept through Boston. Elizabeth was home reading in the study when she heard a strange noise from the garden. Through the window, she saw Michael shielding the newly planted seedlings with his body, completely drenched by the rain. Without thinking twice, she opened the back door. "Get inside now. You'll catch your death out there." Michael hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't want to intrude. Just come in," Elizabeth insisted. Martha brought towels and hot coffee. For the first time, Elizabeth took a closer look at Michael. He must have been about 45, with graying hair, hands calloused from work, but kind, sad eyes. "Are you married?" Elizabeth asked, trying to sound casual. "I was," Michael replied, lowering his gaze. "For my wife passed 2 years ago." "I'm so sorry," Elizabeth said, and for the first time in a long while she felt she wasn't the only person in the world carrying that kind of pain. The pain of loss is the same for everyone, isn't it? Rich or poor, the grief weighs just as heavy. Elizabeth nodded, feeling a connection she hadn't experienced with another person in ages. "How do you manage to care for plants? I look at the garden and can only think of Richard." "At first it was like that for me too," Michael said. "But then I realized tending to something that grows helped me understand life goes on. We don't forget those who've left, but we learn to carry their memory in a way that doesn't hurt as much." The conversation was interrupted by Martha, who arrived whispering nervously, "Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs. Victoria is here and heading this way." Victoria Anderson swept into the kitchen like a hurricane, eyeing Michael with suspicion. "Elizabeth, I need to speak with you. Alone." Michael stood immediately. "Excuse me, ladies, thank you for the coffee, Mrs. Martha." Once he left, Victoria wasted no time. "Elizabeth, have you lost your mind? A strange man in your house. Richard must be turning in his grave." "Victoria, he's just the gardener, and he was protecting the plants from the rain." "Exactly. That's emotional manipulation, Elizabeth. He knows you're vulnerable. Look, I brought a proposal." Victoria opened a folder full of documents. "The company needs a more active partner. With all due respect, a woman alone can't handle a business the size of Heritage Construction. I can buy your share for a very fair price." Elizabeth was furious. "Victoria, I've run this company for 3 years and it's only grown. Richard left it all to me because he trusted my ability. But you're clearly distressed, making poor decisions, like hiring that gardener." "Get out of my house now," Elizabeth shouted, rising from her chair. Victoria left in a rage, but Elizabeth caught the calculating look in her sister-in-law's eyes. She had underestimated Victoria's intentions. She clearly wanted more than just protecting her. In the days that followed, Victoria launched a full smear campaign against Michael. She called several members of the Boston elite, spreading that he was an opportunist trying to take advantage of the wealthy widow. The gossip even reached the mansion staff. Elizabeth overheard 2 maids whispering about the gold-digging gardener and decided it was time to take a stand. On Thursday, during the club's charity luncheon, Victoria made sure to loudly discuss poor men who prey on rich, lonely widows, clearly referencing Elizabeth's situation. "Victoria," Elizabeth said, standing from the table, "if you have something to say about my life, say it to my face." "Elizabeth, darling, I'm just concerned. Everyone's talking about this gardener." "Then I'll set the record straight for everyone," Elizabeth declared, raising her voice so all the women could hear. "Michael Parker is a hard-working, honest man. If anyone has a problem with that, the problem isn't his, it's theirs, for failing to recognize dignity when they see it." Silence fell over the room. Elizabeth left with her head held high, surprised at her own fierceness in defending someone she'd known for such a short time. That night, alone in the study, Elizabeth was sorting through Richard's papers when she found something that made her freeze. It was an old project, handwritten by her late husband himself, an expansion of the garden. The design was nearly identical to what Michael was creating. How was that possible? Michael had never met Richard, or had he? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us creators who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, Elizabeth woke up to Martha knocking urgently on her bedroom door. "Mrs. Anderson, Miss Jennifer arrived from New York City in the middle of the night. She's downstairs, very upset." Elizabeth went down and found her daughter in the living room, her face stormy. "Mom, this can't go on. I came to take you to New York City for a few days away from this place." "Jennifer, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." "Mom, I looked into this Michael Parker. Did you know he lost his house and his small landscaping business when his wife got sick? He's in debt, Mom." Elizabeth felt a pang in her chest, not because of what her daughter was implying, but because of the pain Michael must have endured. "And you think that makes him a bad person?" Elizabeth asked. "Elizabeth, I think it makes him desperate, and desperate people will do anything for money." Their conversation was interrupted when Michael appeared at the back door, visibly uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt. I came to let you know I found pests on the old rose bushes. I need to treat them today or they won't survive." Jennifer shot her mother a look that screamed, "I told you so." "The roses Dad planted?" Jennifer asked, as if Michael had planned this. "Yes, miss. They're the oldest in the garden. Your father must have planted them years ago." "How do you know it was my father?" Jennifer snapped aggressively. Michael looked confused. "Mrs. Martha told me, miss. She said Mr. Richard loved those roses." "How convenient that you're suddenly concerned about the plants with sentimental value," Jennifer continued, standing up. "Jennifer," Elizabeth scolded. "No, Mom. This is calculated manipulation. He researched our family before taking the job." Michael flushed with anger and shame. "Miss, I understand your suspicion. I have a daughter too, and I'd do anything to protect her. But I would never disrespect the memory of someone who went through the same pain I did." "What pain?" Jennifer asked sarcastically. The pain of watching the person you love most in the world wasting away in a hospital, powerless to help, Michael replied, his voice breaking. The room fell into heavy silence. Michael, you don't owe anyone an explanation, Elizabeth said, standing as well. Mum, he's manipulating you. Enough, Jennifer, you don't know this man. I've been living alongside him for weeks. Weeks? Mum, you've known him for weeks and you're already defending him like family? And you've lived in New York City for 5 years and only show up here to criticize me. The argument escalated beyond what either of them expected. Jennifer grabbed her purse and slammed the door on her way out. If you choose this stranger over your own daughter, forget you even have one. Elizabeth was devastated. Michael approached hesitantly. Ma'am, I don't want to cause trouble in your family. Maybe it's best if I leave. No, Elizabeth said firmly. You're the first person in a long time who treats me like a person, not some poor widow who needs protection. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She stayed on the porch, watching the garden under the moonlight. The saplings Michael had planted were growing, bringing life back to the space. What she didn't know was that Victoria hadn't given up on her plans. In the early hours, she and an accomplice sneaked into the garden, intent on destroying Michael's work, so Elizabeth would come to her senses and realize she was being deceived. They uprooted several saplings, trampled the flower beds, and damaged the irrigation system Michael had installed. What they didn't count on was Elizabeth having installed security cameras after recent neighborhood thefts. The next morning, when Michael arrived and saw the destruction, he was heartbroken. It was as if they had destroyed a part of her soul. Who would do such a thing? Asked Martha, horrified. Elizabeth was more furious than sad. She went up to the office and reviewed the security camera footage. What she saw left her speechless. Victoria appeared clearly in the images, alongside a man Elizabeth recognized as Robert, the company accountant who had always been close to her sister-in-law. But there was more. Elizabeth discovered the cameras had recorded other things over the months. Robert appeared multiple times in the company after hours, tampering with files, photographing documents. Elizabeth spent the day investigating and uncovered a web of corruption. Victoria and Robert had been embezzling funds from Heritage Construction for years. Taking advantage of the fact Elizabeth had delegated many administrative duties while caring for Richard during his illness. Inflated contracts, subpar materials, fake suppliers. Victoria didn't want to buy Elizabeth's share out of kindness. She wanted to cover up the thefts and still take control of the company. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On Monday, Elizabeth called an emergency board meeting. Victoria arrived confident, thinking Elizabeth had finally decided to sell her share. Victoria, Robert, before we begin, I want you to see something, Elizabeth said, turning on the projector. The camera footage began to play. First, the destruction of the garden, then the late-night visits to the company. Their faces grew pale. Elizabeth, I can explain, Victoria stammered. Explain it to the police, Elizabeth said coldly. You have 5 minutes to leave my company and my life before I present this evidence officially. Victoria tried to argue, but the other partners had seen enough. She and Robert were unanimously expelled from the room and the company. When Elizabeth got home, she found Michael carefully arranging the plants that could be saved. He worked meticulously, trying to salvage what had been destroyed. Michael, I need to talk to you, Elizabeth said. He turned, bracing for the worst. I know who ruined the garden, and I also know you didn't deserve any of this. Ma'am, maybe it's best if I leave. I don't want to cause you any more trouble. Trouble? Michael, you've been the only good thing in my life these past 3 years. Michael stopped working and looked at her. I don't understand, ma'am. Stop with the ma'am. My name is Elizabeth, and I need you to know that... She hesitated, feeling her heart race. I was dead inside before you came. Miss Elizabeth, just Elizabeth, only Elizabeth. Elizabeth, he said, smiling for the first time since he arrived. I was dead too. Taking care of this garden, seeing you take an interest in the flowers. It was like learning to breathe again. Just then, Martha came running. Miss Elizabeth, Jennifer is back, And she's crying. Jennifer had spent 3 days investigating on her own. Driven by guilt over fighting with her mother, she decided to uncover the truth about Michael Parker. What she found completely surprised her. Not only was Michael honest, but he was also admired throughout the area where he lived. She discovered he donated half his salary to the hospital where his wife had been treated, helping fund care for underprivileged children. She also learned he maintained a community garden in the poor neighborhood where he lived, teaching families how to grow their own food. When she saw her mother and Michael talking in the garden, Jennifer approached humbly. "Michael, I need to apologize," she said, her eyes red from crying. "Miss, you don't have to." "I do. I judged you without knowing you. My mother was right to defend you." Elizabeth embraced her daughter, moved. "Mom, I found out things about Michael that made me ashamed of what I said. Jennifer told me about the community garden and the donations to the hospital. Michael was embarrassed by the attention. It's nothing special. I just try to give back a little of the kindness people showed me when I needed it." "It is special," Jennifer insisted. "It's extraordinary. Mom, he teaches kids to plant. He takes care of elderly people who have no family." Elizabeth looked at Michael with renewed admiration. "Why didn't you ever tell me any of this?" "Because I don't do it for recognition. I do it because I need to. After I lost my wife, I realized helping others was the only way I could help myself." That night, after Jennifer went to bed, Elizabeth and Michael stayed in the garden talking late. "Elizabeth, can I confess something?" "Of course." "When Martha called offering me the job, I almost refused. I was afraid I couldn't work in a place with so much sadness." "Why did you accept?" "Because she told me about your husband's rose bushes, said they were dying, and it was slowly killing you too. I understood exactly what she meant." Elizabeth felt her eyes welling up. "When my wife passed, I let our garden die too. I thought it honored her grief, but later I realized I was wrong. Letting what she loved wither didn't honor her. Nurturing it, making it bloom again. That was true love." "Michael," Elizabeth whispered. "Elizabeth, I need you to know that I—" He hesitated, struggling for words. "That you what?" "That I've fallen in love with you." The silence that followed felt endless. "I know it might seem wrong, too fast, or like I'm taking advantage." "Michael," Elizabeth interrupted, touching his face, "I've fallen for you too." "But your family? What will people say?" "Jennifer understands. And the people who matter, they'll understand too. And your husband's memory." Elizabeth thought for a moment. "Richard taught me how to love, and I think he'd understand that loving you doesn't diminish how much I loved him. They're different loves, unique, each special in their own way." Michael held her hands. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that for the first time in 3 years I feel alive again." The kiss came naturally, among the rose bushes just beginning to bloom once more. From the balcony above, Martha watched with a tearful smile while Jennifer secretly filmed, wanting to preserve that moment forever. In the months that followed, Elizabeth and Michael began working together not just on the mansion's garden, but on a larger project. They transformed part of Heritage Construction's land into community gardens, providing work and food for struggling families in the area. The project caught the attention of local media, but in a positive way. Elizabeth discovered that using her social standing for good brought a satisfaction she'd never known before. "You taught me that life can begin again as many times as it needs to," she told Michael at the first garden's opening. "And you taught me it's possible to honor the past without being trapped by it," he replied. Their romance stirred whispers among the Boston elite, but most came to admire Elizabeth's courage in starting anew. On the 3rd anniversary of Richard's passing, Elizabeth did something that surprised everyone. She and Michael visited his grave together. "Richard," she said, placing flowers on the marble, "I want you to meet Michael. He taught me to love again, not to replace you, but to add to that love. Thank you for teaching me that love is worth it, even when it hurts." Michael was moved, seeing how Elizabeth could honor the past without being imprisoned by it. She speaks of you with such affection, Michael said to the headstone. I promise to take good care of her, just as you did. On the way back, Elizabeth made a decision that had been weighing on her for weeks. Michael, marry me. He pulled the car over to the side of the road. Elizabeth, I know traditionally it's the man who proposes, but I've learned life is too short to wait for traditions. Are you sure? I'm sure I want to build a new life with you. I'm sure Richard would approve, and I'm sure I deserve to be happy again. Michael got out of the car, went to the trunk, and returned with a small box. Funny you should say that, he said, smiling, because I was planning to propose to you this weekend. Really? Really? I bought this ring with the money I've saved these past months. It's nothing too expensive, but... It's perfect, Elizabeth said, holding out her hand. The wedding took place 6 months later in the garden Michael had restored. The ceremony was simple, with few guests, but full of meaning. Jennifer was the maid of honor, Martha cried throughout the entire ceremony, and employees from the company came to celebrate the happiness of the boss they deeply respected. The priest who officiated was the same one who had presided over Richard's funeral. During the homily, he spoke about how true love doesn't end with the loss of a person, but transforms and can give rise to new love. Michael isn't replacing Richard, the priest said. He's adding a new chapter to Elizabeth's life. During the vows, Elizabeth said, Michael, you've taught me it's possible to carry the past without being weighed down by it. I promise to love you with all the intensity of someone who's learned life is precious and every day together is a blessing. Michael, moved, replied, Elizabeth, you've shown me the heart has infinite room for love. I promise to care not just for you, but for the memories and the story that made you the incredible woman I love. The reception was held in the same garden, among the flowers that symbolized their rebirth. During their first dance, Elizabeth looked around and saw the happy faces of their friends, her daughter's proud smile and Martha's emotion. Do you regret anything? Michael asked as they danced. Only that it took me so long to let myself be happy again. And now I know life is worth living, not just surviving. 2 years after the wedding, Elizabeth and Michael had expanded the community garden project to 3 cities in the region. Heritage construction thrived under their joint leadership, and they had established a foundation in Richard's and Michael's late wife's names to help families facing serious illnesses. Jennifer had moved back to Boston and worked at the foundation, coordinating social projects. She had learned from her mother that true wealth lies in making a difference in people's lives. Mom, are you truly happy? Jennifer asked one afternoon as they worked together in the garden. Happier than I ever imagined I could be again, Elizabeth replied. And you don't feel guilty? At first I did, but I've learned guilt is a form of selfishness. Richard loved me too much to want me to stay unhappy forever. He wanted me to be happy. How can you be so sure? Elizabeth smiled and showed her daughter a letter she carried in her purse. Because he wrote it down. The letter read, My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't want you to carry guilt or close yourself off from life. You have too much love in your heart to keep it just for me. If someone ever comes along who makes you smile again, embrace that chance. I'll be happy knowing you're happy. I'll love you forever, but I want you to live forever. Richard, Jennifer cried as she read the letter. Why did you never show me this before? Because you were only ready to understand it now. That evening, Elizabeth and Michael were in the garden as they were every night before bed. It was their ritual, talking about their day among the plants they tended together. Elizabeth, can I ask you something I've always wanted to ask? Of course. Do you still think about Richard? Every day, she answered honestly. Michael stayed silent for a moment. Does that bother you? Elizabeth asked. At first it did. I was afraid I was competing with a memory. And now? Now I understand it's not a competition. It's gratitude. I'm grateful to Richard for loving you so well that you knew how to love me too. Michael, it's true. You can only love so deeply because you learned from him what true love is. In a way, he taught me how to love you through the example he left. Elizabeth moved closer to her husband. Do you know the greatest lesson you've taught me? What? That the heart isn't like a cup emptying when you pour its contents out, The heart is like a fountain. The more love you give, the more love it creates. And you believe that? I do. Because I love you without loving Richard any less. I love Jennifer without loving either of you any less. I love the children at the foundation without diminishing my love for my family. Love multiplies. It doesn't divide. Michael kissed her softly. That's why I love you so much. You've taught me that to love isn't to lose, it's to gain. They stood there, embraced among the rose bushes that now bloomed more beautifully than ever, a symbol that some of life's most beautiful things are born from the ability to begin again. The garden, once a symbol of pain and abandonment, was now a symbol of renewal and hope. The plants that had nearly died were the ones that bloomed the most, as if closeness to loss had taught them to cherish every ray of sunlight. Elizabeth, Michael said, thank you for teaching me it's possible to honor the past without sacrificing the future. Thank you for showing me that starting over isn't betrayal, it's courage. They embraced once more, knowing they had built something rare and precious, a love that didn't compete with the past, but drew wisdom from the lessons only those who have lost can know. In the quiet of the night, amid the scent of flowers and the whisper of leaves, they understood they had found what many spend a lifetime searching for. The peace of knowing true love never ends. It only transforms. And so, Elizabeth Mitchell Anderson, who once swore she'd never love again, discovered that the human heart has an infinite capacity to heal, to bloom anew, to find beauty even after the deepest pain. The garden around them was living proof that the most beautiful things can grow precisely where there was once only sorrow, and that love, when true, is never an ending, only a new beginning. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story of resilience and love. Do you believe Elizabeth made the right choice in allowing herself to love again? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories we've prepared for you.